So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. Today's topic is Alzheimer's Basics, sort of 101. And I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint here with some information because one of the things I want to do here in just a little bit is to show you some slides with pictures of the brain. My name is Sue Ann Jackson, and I'm a certified TEPA, T-E-E-P-A, SNOW, S-N-O-W, trainer. She's an occupational therapist that has worked with the Alzheimer's Association and has worked with folks with dementia and Alzheimer's for over 30 years and has put together this great curriculum. This is actually part 2. We did part 1 called Normal Aging, Not Normal Aging, back a few weeks ago, and we did record it, and it will be posted on our Willow Village YouTube channel. So you will be able, and that's where we are recording this one, and you will also be able to go to that Willow Village YouTube channel and see this this webinar also. So I've been training this material for probably 5 years, and I've been training caregivers for probably 20 years in how to work with folks with dementia. So I have quite a bit of experience working with people. And I contract through Oregon Care Partners. That's who TEPA SNOW folks here in Oregon. We do a lot of training, and Oregon Care Partners is free training for anyone who's a caregiver in the state of Oregon, or a family member, or an interested public party. It's no cost quality training for anybody that wants to know anything about working with elders and folks with dementia. So they have online training. We're not doing any in-person training, but they have lots of webinars. So if you go to their website, OregonCarePartners.com, you'll find their schedule. And folks get CEUs to keep their licensing going, their licensing requirements going. So what do you think of when you hear the word dementia? And a lot of people will say things like confusion, anxiety, isolation, loss of memory, loss of independence is a big one, anxiety, fear, lots of different words. So just think for a minute about what you think about when you hear the word dementia. Dementia is a huge umbrella. We're going to talk about that in just a second. One of the things that the positive approach to care, which is what TEPA SNOW and the Oregon Care Partners are advocating, is that we start to look at folks differently than the medical model looks at them. The medical model looks at symptoms, and we look at what's wrong with people. And with the social model, we're looking at the whole person and how those symptoms affect people's quality of life. So I like to show this quote from this gentleman named James Thomas, who lived with Alzheimer's for 8 years. And he said he's hungry for the life that's still being taken away from him. He's still a human being. He still exists inside. He has a family. He hungers for friendship, love, happiness, and the touch of a loved one's hand. What he asks for is that what's left of his life should have some meaning. He wants to have something. He says, give me something to die for. Help me be strong and free until myself no longer exists. We call this person-centered care. We want to be looking at that person and helping that person be the most they can be, no matter where they are in their life and no matter what's happening for them. How can they be the most they can be? This is some of the information I went over in the normal aging, not normal aging. We want to think about how we think about things, think about our beliefs, how we think about things. I should let you guys know that my cat's going crazy over here. So you may hear some, she's hitting the bells on the door, wanting me to let her out, but it's not happening. So one of the things is we want to think about what we believe, and we want to think about how we talk about folks with dementia. And one of the words that we use a lot is challenging or problem behaviors. And we want to realize that this is folks acting out because they have an unmet need that they can't tell us about. They can't communicate with us about it. And so we want to change our thinking so that when we hear problem behavior or challenging behavior, we're thinking expression of unmet human need. What is that unmet need? The other thing about person-centered care is that we really need to get to know the full, complete person. And those of us who are family caregivers or family friends or family support know a lot of these things. But when we're talking about caregivers in communal living situations or in-home caregivers, they oftentimes need our help to know these things about the person. What's their life story? What's their career and hobbies? What's their spirituality or religion? What's their culture? And by culture, I mean a lot of different cultures, not just ethnicity, but also ages have a culture, women and men have a culture, our neighborhoods have cultures, a lot of different cultures. Your in-laws' family culture may be different from your family culture. So it's really important to know all those things about somebody. What do they want to accomplish? What have they accomplished in their life? But what do they want to accomplish today? It might just be a walk around the block, but you need to know that about them. What are their hopes and their fears? And what are their likes and their dislikes? And dislikes and fears oftentimes come out for folks with dementia when they're feeling vulnerable. For instance, when they're taking a bath or getting hygiene, because they're sometimes naked, they're in a very vulnerable position, and sometimes this is when their fears and the things that they don't like come out the most. As caregivers, people talk to the person a lot about what they're doing. You know, we're helping you get dressed, we're helping you brush your teeth, we're brushing your hair. But oftentimes people don't talk to folks with dementia about other things. And it's really important to even just check in with them, even if they're sort of time traveling and you don't know where they are. If you can just insert yourself into their reality and go with them and go with the flow and just chat about whatever's happening at the time. Again, we don't want to look at them as demented. We want to think about them as a person living with dementia. And you'll hear me talk about that. A person living with dementia, a person living with Alzheimer's, a person living with diabetes. How is that affecting their life? And we just talked about communicating through their actions. They may be acting out to try and tell us something that they can't tell us in any other way. So here's some examples about some language. We're trying to move from the whole medical model to the social model. So instead of talking about an Alzheimer's patient, we're going to say a person living with Alzheimer's. Instead of challenging or problem behaviors, expression of unmet need. We oftentimes hear the word wandering in conjunction with Alzheimer's or dementia. We can also call it exploring or walking. I hear people talk about adult diapers all the time, and it just makes me cringe. We want to talk about continence products or just use the brand name. And you'll hear people talk about units or facilities. We're trying to talk about communities. Let's switch that facility, that medical term, to community or communal living arrangement or neighborhood or program. Anyway, think about how you talk about things, because that's a way that we share our beliefs. So I'm going to just jump right in. We're going to talk about dementia, which is a large umbrella. There's over 120 types of dementia, but I want to talk about dementia symptoms because that's what a lot of people get nervous about. They feel like they have, they hear about a symptom and they think, oh, I must have it. But there are things that look like dementia that aren't dementia. One of those things is depression. Now, dementia is a medical diagnosis. But depression is a mental health diagnosis. So they're treated very differently, even though they have similar symptoms and they both can come on slowly. So it's about thinking, not being able to kind of think the way you've always thought before, not being able to remember, thinking that things don't really feel like they're worth it, or losing some of your functioning, having mood swings or personality changes. changes in sleep pattern. So it's really important if you're feeling some of those things, or you notice that a friend has those or a family member, make sure they get evaluated by a doctor so that they can be treated in the correct way. There's another thing that mimics dementia, and it's called delirium. And this happens to us sometimes when we get a urinary tract infection or an upper respiratory infection. We kind of have some swift changes. We may have some hallucinations or delusions, but the changes in our body come on really fast. And we may sort of be there and not be there, sort of feel like we're here and we're not here. But again, that can be caused by urinary tract infections and upper respiratory infections. And they're very toxic and dangerous if they aren't treated right away. So it's important to get people assessed for those. And if it is an infection, they can get on meds, and within 24 hours, they're much better. But if it's not, then it's a symptom of something else, and they definitely need to be evaluated. So if any of those symptoms or signs come up, please get people into the doctors. The other thing that begins to look like dementia is called mild cognitive impairment. You'll hear it talked about as MCI. And it is also the beginning of a not normal condition that affects our memory, our language, our behavior, and our motor skills. So again, it looks a lot like dementia. It is not life-threatening in itself, but 3 out of 4 people who get mild cognitive impairment go on to get some form of dementia. The reason I'm bringing this one up is because right now what they're finding is that older folks who have to go under anesthesia for a period of time for surgeries are coming up out of that anesthesia with some kind of MCI. There's no way to predict that it's going to happen or not going to happen, or how long it's going to last. It might last 2 weeks, it might last 6 months, and it might never go away and it might move into some kind of dementia. So when you know somebody who has to have some surgery, or you have to have some surgery, make sure that you talk to your doctor and the anesthesiologist about the risks for you. I know a couple of years ago, I had a knee surgery, and I told the doctor I wasn't worried at all about the knee surgery, but I wanted to talk to the anesthesiologist. And I told him that I do these dementia trainings, and I know that MCI is a big possibility. And he said, for the knee surgery, they were going to give me, I think, a spinal block of some kind, and then put me under a twilight sleep. So it wasn't a general anesthesia for me to come up out of. And it was kind of weird and felt very strange, but I didn't have to worry about this risk. So please be sure and talk to folks about it. So dementia itself, what happens when we get dementia? We have structural changes that are permanent to our brain. The cells in our brain begin to shrink and die. And the other thing that happens are chemical changes. Now, each of us has a different chemical makeup anyway. And so our chemicals, things that happen in our body, are variable. And I'm not a medical background. I have a social work background. So what I can tell you is very minimal about the scientific way things work. But the chemicals that move between the cells is how our cells and our nervous system talks to each other. That's kind of the bottom line nutshell. And when our cells start to change and produce and send less chemicals, then sometimes we're kind of here with you, and sometimes our brain isn't talking to itself, and we are sort of in our own little world and not here with you. So dementia is chronic, and it doesn't get fixed. It's progressive, and it gets worse. They haven't figured out a way to cure it yet. It isn't anything we can stop or control. It's different for every person. We're going to look at some brain changes, and those are predictable, but how each person experiences those brain changes is very different because of our chemical makeup being so different. Again, dementia is not a mental illness, it's a health diagnosis. It's really hard at times for everybody around the person and the person who's experiencing it. And dementia is eventually terminal, because our brain helps our whole body work. Our brain tells our heart to pump blood. Our brain tells our throat to swallow. Our brain tells our lungs to breathe. And because our brain is shrinking and dying, at some point it isn't going to tell all those body systems to do what they're supposed to do. So our brain will eventually die, which means our body will eventually die. So there are over 120 types of dementia. Now, I know you guys are all, this is kind of a depressing topic. It's not a real exciting topic. But I think it's amazing that they found 120 types of dementia. And what I can tell you is these are some of the more common ones under this umbrella that you're seeing on the screen here. Alzheimer's disease, 75 to 85% of people who get dementia are getting Alzheimer's. Now, there are at least 4 or 5 classifications of Alzheimer's because many of these dementias combine. And so there's Alzheimer's that has, connected with other ones also. I'm going to just not go through this because I think I did that on the aging and not normal aging. But again, 75 to 85% of the people who get dementia get Alzheimer's. There's young onset, 65 and younger, late life onset, 66 and older. And there are several kinds that are pretty common. The vascular dementia has to do with strokes. Lewy body dementia is characterized by hallucinations and delusions. Frontal temporal lobe dementias is behavior changes because that's where our filter is. And then there's all kinds of other dementias. So now I'm going to switch and we want to talk about Alzheimer's in particular. 1 out of 5 families is affected by Alzheimer's in some way. With Alzheimer's, the new information coming into our brain gets lost and recent memory worsens. So we can't remember whether we had breakfast this morning. I can still remember what happened when I was 12, but I can't remember what I did this morning or maybe yesterday. With Alzheimer's, I'm going to have problems with finding a word, and I might misspeak a word. Those of us who watched Normal Aging and Not Normal Aging last time saw that she held up a cup and said it had firmaments on it, and we're all pretty sure she meant fingerprints, and she just threw that word in there. So folks with Alzheimer's just throw a word out there and it's the wrong word, but they just keep going. People with Alzheimer's can become more impulsive and indecisive. They can get easily lost. Changes are noticeable every 6 to 12 months. And typically, Alzheimer's can last anywhere from 8 to 12 years. I've had people in my classes tell me 2.5, and I had one gal tell me her mom made it 21 years. So a lot of it depends on other things happening, like how healthy is your body, what are other underlying conditions that you might have, what's your living environment, do you have a lot of social connections, so a lot of other things about the lifestyle also have to do with how long folks will last. So take a look at these 2 brains. The brain on the right is a brain with Alzheimer's. The brain on the left is a gentleman who died from a car accident. Most everything else about the 2 men was very similar. Age, physical characteristics, everything was similar except look at the difference in these brains. You can see the brain on the right is physically withering and dying. So abilities are getting lost. And what I want you to notice is there a particular part of the brain that's withering and dying, or is it the whole brain? When we think about dementia and Alzheimer's, we think about memory loss. But if you look at these brains, it's the whole brain that's shrinking and dying. So the whole brain, so that's things around the heart, things around motor skills. It's not just things around memory. It's about motor skills and behavior, and all kinds of abilities are lost. Again, with Alzheimer's, the brain changes are pretty predictable, but each person's experience is individual. You won't hear somebody say something about a normal experience. That's normal with Alzheimer's, that you just don't hear that very often because every person's experience is really different. So this is what we call a PET scan. And the top level is if you were to lift off the top of my head, just lift it off and then look at me from up above. And the bottom level of pictures is if you were to cut my head diagonally and look at me from the back. So what you'll see is a lot of red and yellow in the normal on the left-hand side. That is brain activity. The purple is not much brain activity. If you look in the early Alzheimer's in the second column there, you'll start to see a lot less red and yellow and a lot more of the purple. As we move toward late stage Alzheimer's, you'll see a whole lot of purple and not very much red and yellow. And on the bottom, you'll see sort of 4 to 6 areas, mostly with the red and yellow. That's what we call our survival. That's our amygdala, our survival mode, fight, flight, freeze. So pretty much the rest of their brain working isn't happening. They're just in their survival mode stuff. We thought it would be very interesting to compare with a child's brain. So this child is about 18 months old. So think about how we think about children at 18 months old. It's pretty exciting. They're just starting to really understand themselves and the world and speak and walk and talk and all those kinds of fun things. But when we think about folks in late stage Alzheimer's, we're mostly thinking about everything they've lost. So I want to challenge everybody to begin to think about folks, if you have somebody in late stage Alzheimer's, think about what they still have and how you can still help them be the most they can be, instead of being so sad about all the things they've lost. So here's a part of the brain that there's 3 different areas in this section of the brain. The piece of brain on the top is, of course, the guy who died in the car accident. And the piece of brain on the bottom is the person who has Alzheimer's. Notice the difference in the whole piece. There's a lot less of the white. The white is that's our cells talking to each other. That's our nervous system, and storage, what I call storage cabinets, for memory of how we do things. So if you look at the area in the red circle, that's our sensory strip. So that's, white matter, sensory, motor skills, and there's huge changes. If you look at the difference between the one at the top and the one at the bottom, you'll understand why our motor skills decrease, and our senses are sometimes, we still have taste and smell. I'll talk to you in a little bit about how we're going to lose quite a bit of vision. If you look, I'm going to skip the blue for a second and go down to the green, which is formal speech and language. And that's huge changes also. Look at the difference between the green circle at the top and the green circle at the bottom. Now, Teepa Snow has a way of helping us remember. She says the left side is language and it gets lost. So language is on the left and it gets lost. And then rhythm is on the right and it gets retained. Rhythm is on the right and it gets retained. So if you look at the green, this is why people lose their speech, because if you look at the green circle, it's just, there's just nothing there anymore if you look at the bottom brain, piece of brain. Now, what I think is interesting, if you look at the blue, we've lost some, but we haven't lost everything like we have with the green and the language. When we're young and we're learning words, and we start to learn swear words and sex talk and things that we aren't supposed to say in public. Our parents say, we don't talk about that in public. We, for some reason, put them on the right side with our rhythm, because they aren't in our section with our language because we don't use them publicly. So we put them on our right side. So if we get Alzheimer's later and we lose all our speech on the left side, we still have those expletives, those swear words, that sex talk, all those kinds of things. That's why even if it's somebody who's never talked like that before, if they get Alzheimer's, that's are the only words they have to remember. So I think that's fascinating. I wish Judy Belk was here so she could talk about that, maybe with her speech kinds of things. Anyway, automatic speech, rhythm, and music. So rhythm is with us, and there is a program called Musicophilia. That's a research study that they're doing with a lot of folks with dementia. And if you want to see a case study that's really good, go to YouTube and type in the words "alive inside," alive inside. And it's a gentleman who's involved in this musicophilia case study. He's got Alzheimer's. It talks to his daughter. It talks to the Dr. Oliver Sacks, S-A-C-H-S, who's doing the musicophilia studies. And it shows you the gentleman just with Alzheimer's, and then it shows them putting headphones on with the music that he used to listen to when he was younger. And it shows him sort of really kind of engaging with the world again, or at least with this music. And he can talk with Dr. Sacks a little bit. I mean, it's not a cure or anything, but it brings him up out of himself a little bit. So it's about a 20-minute video, and I encourage you to go watch it, especially if you have somebody that you're around. You can see how much the music can really help them. Automatic chit chat speech is also in that blue area. And so it might take a few minutes. If you sit down with somebody, they can chit chat with the best of us. Hi, how are you? How's the weather? It might take a few minutes before you can realize that they're not really going any deeper. So these are so formal speech on the left is lost, but rhythm and expletives and swear words and things that we were told you couldn't do when you were younger. The other thing about the rhythm and speech is that folks with dementia, Alzheimer's in particular, still have rhythm, and so you can get them to dance and do things. I helped a friend keep her mom at home by helping her with caregiving, and she would get really mad at me, and all I had to do was kind of walk out of the room and walk back in and be dancing and clapping, and she would forget she was mad and she would dance and clap with me, and it was really fun. So this is the learning and memory area of our brain. It's called the hippocampus, and there are huge changes here. Look at the brain at the top, and that's the one who died from the car wreck, and the brain at the bottom. And look at the difference in that red circle. So we don't have all that white stuff again, which is the way the cells talk to each other and those storage cabinets about the things that we've done and the words that we have. So what we lose here in memory is one of the big things that everybody thinks of, confusion and memory loss. So we lose immediate recall. Again, we can't remember if we had breakfast or what we had for breakfast. Eventually, we're going to lose attention to selected information. So you know how you can think of something now and you can sort of pull it out of nowhere. But if and when you have Alzheimer's, you can't do that anymore. Recent events, we lose information about recent events, and we also lose information about relationships. I will know on a heart level that I know you, but I won't know if you're my mom, my sister, my brother, my friend, my cousin. I won't know what that relationship is. I'll just know that you're special to me and I know you from that heart energy level. The preserved abilities, if you know folks with Alzheimer's, are that they can tell you things from when they were 12, their family vacation. They can recite poems that they had to learn in high school or things that they knew about college. Long ago memories are very clear for them. Confabulation is making up a story to help something make sense. We also talked about this one in the normal aging, not normal aging. People with Alzheimer's do not think logically. Their brain doesn't go from A to B to C. So if something doesn't make sense to them, like Teepa Snow's dirty coffee cup, which she knew shouldn't be there, she has to make up a story about why it's there. And her story included gypsies coming into her house and stealing her toilet paper and all kinds of things. The confabulation stories can come from movies they've seen, books they've read, life experiences, and they're not deliberately trying to mislead you or make up lies. They're just trying to make something make sense to them that doesn't make sense to them. What's also preserved is emotional memories and motor memories. So our body has memories. So our emotions have memories and our bodies have memories. And so our body holds these emotional and motor memories. If I hand you a sweater and say, put it on, you might not remember how to do that. But if I help you start it up your one arm, your body will remember how many times it's put that sweater on, and your body will just kind of do it. It doesn't need your brain to help it. If I told you to close your eyes and write your name, you could do that. Your hand has written your name so many times before. So you have motor memories. And then the emotional memories too. And these are both good and bad. Sometimes we have trauma when we're younger, and those emotional and motor memories are stuck in our body. And if we get to that feeling again, it can bring up things for us that aren't necessarily pleasant. And so we need to know what triggers those and how to help folks move through them if they come up. Prefrontal cortex is this area on the forehead right here. It's executive control center is what we call it. This is where our emotions, our behaviors, our judgment, and our reasoning. This is our filtered area. This is, so if and when it hits here, this is when people start acting like different people. That's how we knew my aunt had something. She was the nicest person and sweetest person you'd ever want to meet. And after a bit, she started to become nasty and mean. And so we knew something was really wrong. And she, sure enough, had some Alzheimer's. So how do people take in information? Through our senses, right? Through seeing, through hearing, through touching and feeling, through smelling and tasting. So our top three senses are what we see, what we hear, and what we touch and feel. Taste and smell is big, but it's not as big as these three. With folks with dementia or Alzheimer's, they pay much more attention to what they see than what they hear. And part of the reason for this is that at some point in the dementia, usually in the middle stages of the Alzheimer's, they begin to not comprehend. Hearing loss is part of normal aging. It's not part of Alzheimer's. But comprehension loss is part of Alzheimer's. At some point, they start to drop a word here and there. And Teepa Snow says that it's about 1 out of every 4 words gets lost. So when they're saying to us, I don't, they're saying, what? It's not that they don't hear us physically. It's that they don't understand what we're saying, because 1 out of every 4 or so words is getting dropped. And so the sentence doesn't make sense. So if you were to go on YouTube and type in Teepa Snow, she has a whole bunch of videos, and you would be able to find, if you typed in the word like comprehension or something like that, you would be able to find she's done a video where she reads a paragraph, dropping every 4th word, and it just doesn't make any sense, so that you can experience what that feels like. But what we see is right in front of us. And there are some vision changes with folks with dementia, and we'll talk about those in just a second. But here's the area of the brain that has vision in it. So the brain on the left is the gentleman who died from the car accident. The brain on the right is the brain that's shrinking and dying from Alzheimer's. So what we lose is our peripheral vision, the edges of our field, and the depth perception. And that can happen in the first stage of Alzheimer's, where 7 out of 10 people have not even been diagnosed yet. They don't even really know they have it yet. We're already losing the edges of our vision, our peripheral field, and depth perception. A little bit scary to think of all the folks out there driving with no depth perception, right? Um, Toward the middle of the Alzheimer's middle stage, we start to lose object recognition linked to purpose. This just means I know it's a toothbrush, but I forget that it's to brush my teeth. I know it's a hairbrush, but I forget that I'm supposed to brush my hair with it. One of the common things you'll see is people trying to brush their teeth with their hairbrush or brush their hair with their toothbrush, or they'll see a spoon and they don't remember they're supposed to eat with the spoon, so they eat with their fingers. And they're slower to process because of scanning and shifting of focus. So we already know that we're slower to focus with not normal aging because our brain isn't working as well. And we're also, I'll show you in a minute, we're having to scan and look down and then look across. So we're having to scan and look, and our brain is just working much, much slower. We talked about even normal processing. We peak our processing between the ages of 25 and 30. So even with normal aging, we're processing a lot slower. And I'm going to have you guys be able to see in just a minute what folks with Alzheimer's can actually see. So you'll understand about the slower to process. So what's preserved is we see things right in front of us, right in front of us. And we're still curious about things. So for instance, if we're working with somebody or we have a family member who needs a cane or a walker, and they're sitting down and they see something across the room, but their walker or their cane is to the side of them, they're not going to remember that they need that walker or that cane. They're just going to get up and try to go to what they see. So we need to remember that folks can't see and don't have that depth perception. And we need to have things placed where they can, not in front of them so they trip over it, but to the side and front where they can actually see it. Okay, so here's what I've been telling you about. This is how I'm going to have you guys experience what folks can see. So in the first early stages of Alzheimer, it's like we have scuba vision. So I want you to put your hands up to your eyes like a scuba mask. Now, think about, what can you see? Can you see the ceiling? Can you see the floor? Can you see to the side of you without moving your head? Because remember, take your scuba mask away and look around. You can see the ceiling without really moving your head. You can see the floor, but now put the scuba mask back on. Now, can you see the ceiling? Can you see the floor? Okay, so think about, and I don't know if you'll be able to see me, but think about as somebody is walking, I'm looking across the room and I can see, with my scuba mask on, I can see where I want to go, but I want to watch my feet. I want to be looking at my feet too to make sure I don't trip over something in the way. So I have to look down at my feet and then look across where I'm going and then look down at my feet and then look across where I'm going. So this is where that shifting and scanning, so I'm shifting my view and I'm having to scan, and I already process slower, but I'm trying to watch my feet and I'm trying to look across the room. Okay. So that's the first stage. Now remember, in that first early stages, 7 out of 10 people haven't even been diagnosed yet, but they already have this vision loss. Now in the middle stages, it's more like you have binoculars. So put binoculars up to your eyes. And this brings your vision in even more. Even more. So again, can you see the ceiling? Can you see the floor without moving your head? Can you even see the table? Like if you're trying to eat, you might have to look down and then, look back up. So one of the things that I tell people about in all these areas is to be sure that as a friend or a support person or a caregiver, when you come up to somebody, you don't stand right smack in front of them. This is part of Teepa Snow's, she has a whole positive physical approach to coming up to people. They can't see you if you're on their side, but if you're, if you're right in front of them, like I am with you, looking at you now, it can be very confrontive and it can feel intimidating because that's all they can see. You're just right in front and that's everything they can see. So you want to stand just a little bit to the side. And if you are really living and spending a lot of time with somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia, you want to go to the YouTube Teepa Snow and look up the positive physical approach. That's what I teach when I teach folks who are working with folks with dementia. It's an actual way of approaching people to be careful and make sure they see you. Now, in the third and final stages of Alzheimer's, people have monocular vision, just from one eye. And 9 out of 10 people who are in these final stages have just this monocular vision. I'm not sure how your body decides which side, but I'm guessing it's probably your dominant eye. I don't know. Again, I'm not a medical person, but it's just seeing from one. But the important thing, I think, is the fact that in the early stages, we have scuba vision and we don't even necessarily know we have dementia yet. So there's all kinds of visual cues we can use to help people, but it's important to know that they do understand your gestures. They do still understand facial expressions. And if you demonstrate something, they can demonstrate it back to you. We know a lot about public space and personal space now with the social distancing and the whole COVID. And when we're being with folks who have dementia, we want to make sure that we're not coming into their personal space until they see us and hear us and we have permission to be there, because they're not always in our world. Sometimes they're in their own world and we don't want to surprise them or scare them or make them feel unsafe. And we absolutely don't want to touch them until they've given us permission to come in. And the other thing to know is that dementia robs the skill from our fingers before it robs the strength from our hand. So if we're shaking hands with them or holding hands with them, they could really squeeze and hurt you, but they may not be able to hold a fork and eat. So it's very interesting. And there's something called hand under hand support that we teach caregivers how to help people with dementia do things so that we don't have to do it for them or to them, but we can really help them to do it. And again, if you go to Teepa Snow on YouTube and look at hand under hand, I didn't go on into this one here because this is more of an informational class, but you can contact me if you have to caregive or if you have a family member or a close friend and you want to know how to do some of these things. I'd be happy to help show you. Again, hearing isn't affected except for comprehension, but hearing can help people calm down. So it's important to not try to talk to people so much because they can't process our talking. But if we have to help them calm down, it's good to know what sounds or what music or what kinds of things helps them relax. But again, here's the part of our brain for comprehension and understanding. And if you look at the red circle on the left, you can see all that lovely white stuff that isn't there on the right. So what we lose is the ability to interpret words. And we miss about 1 out of every 4 words as somebody's going on. So the more simply you can say things to people, the better. Also, we get very, very distracted. We get off target. It's very hard to focus. What's preserved is the ability to recognize what the facial expressions mean on somebody else. We still understand their tone of voice. We understand some nonverbal behavior. And the other thing about folks with Alzheimer's is they learn and understand how to cover up how bad it is for them, so people around them don't know really how bad it is. With language, look at again, the top picture has so much of the white, and the bottom picture with the brain from the person with Alzheimer's. So again, language, we can't find the right words. We're just pulling words out of nowhere. We call that word salad. They just don't make any sense. We do not have the ability for vague language. It has to be very concrete. Eventually, we lose the ability to even say single phrases and talk in any sound or vocalizing, and so we are unable to make our needs known. What's preserved is singing. If you can get them singing songs they knew in their youth, poetry and prose, things they may have had to memorize. Folks who are churchgoers or will remember Bible verses and things like that. Automatic chit-chat speech they can still do. And those swear words, the sex talk and forbidden words that we talked about that we learn when we're young, that get put on the right-hand side. Communication gets a little tough. We want to not give folks too many choices. They get confused and overwhelmed. We do want to give them a choice, but we might say, do you want this shirt or that shirt? Don't take them to the closet and say, what do you want to wear? Do you want to wear this shirt or that shirt? But you want to have momentum built in. Folks with Alzheimer's will a lot of times say no when they don't really mean no. So we want to build momentum in. So instead of saying, do you want to go for a walk? You might want to say, it's time for a walk. Do you want to go that way or this way? Instead of asking them if they want to put their socks on, you might say, it's time to put socks on. Do you want this pair or this pair? We want to give them choice. And if they really mean no, we'll be able to figure that out. But they're going to say no a lot. They may act like children, but they aren't children. So we don't want to treat them like children. We want to treat them like adults with as much dignity and respect as we can. We already talked about simple is better, limit our words. We need to be moving slowly. In today's world, a lot of us go at 120 miles an hour. We cannot do that when we're with somebody with Alzheimer's. They feel that quickness and they get really frustrated and anxious. We have to be very slow and act like we have all the time in the world in order to be with them. Taste is important. Taste is comfort, it's culture, it's tradition, it's community, it's social interaction. It's definitely flavor and pleasure. And the bottom line is taste is sustenance and nourishment. I told you guys earlier about my friend's mom, Mamshi. In her later stages, in order to get her to eat, we had to grate chocolate into everything. So we had grated chocolate in her eggs for breakfast. We had grated chocolates on her turkey sandwich for lunch. She wanted to taste that sweet. And at that point, it didn't matter. We were just trying to get things into her body. So it was okay. People with dementia can still enjoy food and should have that opportunity. Normal aging, we lose the sensitivity in our taste buds anyway. So of course we're gonna lose them. And people start to crave heavier and stronger tasting foods. Think about when you have a bad cold and you're all stuffed up and you need something really salty or super sweet. If you look at the tongue diagram on the screen in front of you, you'll see sweet and salty is on the tip of your tongue, and then sweet is in the middle of your tongue, and bitter is way in the back, and sour is on the sides. So taste is important, and taste can bring back those emotional memories that we talked about earlier. If you're around somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia of some kind and what you're doing doesn't seem to be working, just stop what you're doing right away. Just take a couple steps back and take a couple of deep breaths and think about what you're doing and how you might tweak it a little bit and then reapproach. Like I mentioned before, with Mamshi, if she got upset or frustrated, I just had to walk out of the room and come back in, clapping and dancing or singing or something like that. You just need to know that what works right now may not work, because remember, their chemicals are coming and going. And so what works right now may not work in an hour, might not work tomorrow. You're not going to find something that's going to be great that you can just do forever. You're going to have to keep constantly thinking and being flexible and adaptable. For those of you who actually are around folks with dementia, there are we talk about 3 stages or designations. Those are the medical ways of doing it. There's a couple of different classifications. I think 1 to 7 and 1 to 5. But Teepa has worked with enough people that she has broken it down into about 6 different stages. And she calls them gems because they're valuable. And the people with Alzheimer's are valuable. And so this is the list. It's sapphires and diamonds and emeralds, ambers and rubies and pearls. And she has done an app for people's phones. If you're around folks or need to know about it, there's a free app for your phone that talks about these gems and goes into more about what to expect during that stage, and also how to work with people at that point. Um, Basically, in the beginning, people are just slower, but they're still okay. They start to move into one she calls the diamonds, and this is a time of repetition and routines. And their wording, their talking can be very cutting and direct at this point. They can feel mean, but they don't mean to be. Then they sort of move into the middle stage where they're sort of time traveling. We don't know where they are. We just have to kind of join them. This is where you might see somebody sitting on a bench in the hallway, and they might say, you'd say, "What are you doing?" And they say, "I'm waiting for the school bus." And so you just want to maybe sit down and say, "Oh, okay. What are you going to do at school today?" You want to go in and be with them at their time. Or you can talk with them about, what are they going to wear? Or maybe you could tell them it's Saturday and there isn't any school today. There's all kinds of things you can do, but you want to try to just redirect them. And it's usually fairly easy to distract them. After emerald is amber, and they're in the moment. If you know what amber is, it's a piece of petrified, it's a petrified insect in sap, in petrified sap. So it's stuck in that moment of time. And then as they move toward that late stage, she calls them rubies. They've lost all their fine motor control and they're kind of stop and go. And then she likes to think of folks in the very final stages as a pearl in a clamshell. We're taking care of that body, that clamshell, but we're really dealing with the essence of the person, which is the pearl in that shell. So there's an app. Again, if you go to YouTube, she's got a 20-minute video talking more about these gem stages. If you just go to YouTube, Teepa Snow, and then type in gems, you'll find that. But if you have to be around folks, or you're spending a lot of time, or you've got family members, I highly recommend the app. It's very helpful. That's the information I had for you today. Does anybody have any questions? I know I went really fast. These are some more information and resources. There's Teepa Snow's website, and again, she has a ton of stuff on YouTube. The ADRC of Oregon, which we've talked about before, and I've also done a walkthrough of that website. This link goes specifically to the information about Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Association of Oregon is definitely out there and has a 24/7 hotline number. And if you happen to live down in Marion, Polk, Lynn, Benton counties, there's also the Alzheimer's Network. Again, I want to thank Oregon Care Partners, and please feel free to go to their website and look up more kinds of information about medication and things. Joan?
Well, you've mentioned Teepa Snow a lot. Are there a whole and the person-centered approach? Um, are there other resources, or is her approach pretty centric at this point? Everybody kind of thinks this is a good approach. I'm kind of interested where she is in the total spectrum.
There are quite a few different approaches. Most of them are person-centered. Teepa's is really great, and she has a lot of experience. There's also best friends approach is another way of working with folks with Alzheimer's and dementia. There's a couple of other ones, and I'm trying to remember their name. I've shoot, uh, 20, 24 hours something. There are other approaches. Teepa Snows is the one that I've been trained in. I know that the best friends is a very broad one out there that people really like a lot. And they're all person-centered. It's all about making that person the center, and then how their life is being affected by everything. So that's a great question. And I'm sorry, I don't know some of the other approaches, but she is pretty well known, and it is everybody doesn't agree with her classifications, but they seem to make sense to the folks who use them. Ellen, do you know some more about some of it?
I do not, but I really liked her gem classification.
Yeah.
Well, I saw my mother and my grandmother go through all those stages, and I really like how it preserves the dignity of the person that's still inside there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what attracted me to hers. I worked and did some training with the disability world, and they use the person-centered thinking. Um, and this, I think, really follows through with that whole person-centered thinking, where you're just really with that person in this moment with whatever's happening for them and trying to help sort it through. And the other thing is that with COVID and all the stress that people are feeling, those first couple stages, you don't have to really be in Alzheimer's to go through some of that. Some of those things and some of those behaviors, if we just get stressed, our brain doesn't function as well. And so, it may feel like you have something going on, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's Alzheimer's or dementia. It can just be stress. Yeah, go. Oh, okay. So if there aren't any more questions, I appreciate you guys being with me today. And feel free, again, we're going to be posting this on our YouTube channel, West Lynn Lake Oswego, Willow, WLLO Village. We have a YouTube channel and this will be posted there. And I really appreciate your attention and time and hope this has been helpful. Feel free to contact me at suannej@willowvillage.org if you have more questions. Thanks. Bye.